genre of the day. In the 70s, it was Led Zeppelin, Purple, Black Sabbath.
Welcome, rock music fans! Today we're going to talk about Ritchie Blackmore, the famous guitarist from Deep Purple and Rainbow. He's the man who created the legendary riff for Smoke on the Water, which many people consider the most recognizable guitar riff of all time. But there's a side to this guitar legend that doesn't get talked about as much, according to various sources in the music industry. Ritchie Blackmore had a reputation for being one of the most difficult and strong-minded guitarists in rock music history. It wasn't just that he had opinions about other musicians. People who knew him say he genuinely couldn't stand certain guitar players. These weren't just minor disagreements either. We're talking about serious conflicts, harsh words, and feuds that made waves throughout the entire guitar community. Blackmore was famous for being a perfectionist. He had very high standards for music and for guitar playing specifically. Along with this perfectionism came a temper that could flare up quickly. People who worked in the music industry during his prime years say he had absolutely no patience for guitarists he thought were overrated or not as skilled as everyone claimed. When Blackmore didn't respect someone's playing ability, he didn't keep it to himself. He made his feelings very clear to anyone who would listen. Over the years, Blackmore developed rivalries with everyone from rock legends to blues masters. Some of these conflicts became famous stories that guitar enthusiasts still talk about today. Let's look at 10 guitarists who, according to various reports, Blackmore had serious problems with, starting with Eddie Van Halen, the guitarist who revolutionized rock music with his two-handed tapping technique. According to people familiar with Blackmore's opinions, he thought Eddie's playing style was all flash and spectacle without real musical depth. Reports suggest Blackmore couldn't appreciate Eddie's innovative approach to the guitar at all. The tension apparently started when Eddie completely changed the guitar world in the late 1970s. People close to the situation say Blackmore felt threatened by how quickly Eddie's tapping technique took over rock music. He supposedly described it as circus tricks for guitar players who couldn't write proper melodies. One music journalist claimed to have heard Blackmore say that Eddie's guitar solos were just meaningless displays of speed that impressed young fans but didn't have real musical composition behind them. Things reportedly became uncomfortable when both guitarists were interviewed for guitar magazines. According to witnesses, Blackmore refused to admit that Eddie had any influence on modern guitar playing. Some people say he dismissed Van Halen's entire body of work as simple party rock music for drunk Americans. This rivalry became well known among people who followed guitar music closely. What really bothered Blackmore, according to sources, was that he believed Eddie represented everything that was wrong with guitar playing in the 1980s. He apparently told friends that Eddie's focus on showmanship overshadowed genuine musical skill and the kind of classical training that Blackmore valued. People who worked in the music industry at the time remember Blackmore saying that tapping was just a temporary gimmick that would eventually disappear. Of course, it never did disappear and remains a standard technique today. Next is Slash, the famous guitarist who always wore a top hat. According to various sources, Blackmore thought Slash was getting way too much credit for playing relatively simple blues bass guitar lines. He apparently resented how incredibly popular Slash became in the late 80s and early 90s. The problems reportedly started when Guns N' Roses became one of the biggest rock bands in the world. People familiar with the situation say Blackmore was angry that Slash was being called one of the greatest guitarists ever. He supposedly told music journalists that Slash was just playing basic pentatonic scales and getting praised excessively for it. One anonymous source claimed to have heard Blackmore say that Slash's guitar solos were predictable blues cliches without any real originality. Kirk Hammett from Metallica was another guitarist Blackmore allegedly had issues with. According to sources, Blackmore viewed Kirk as a limited metal player who didn't have much range in his musical abilities. He apparently had no respect for Kirk's thrash metal style of guitar playing. The rivalry supposedly began when Metallica dominated the heavy metal scene in the 1980s. People close to the situation say Blackmore dismissed Kirk's playing as fast but messy exercises using pentatonic scales. He allegedly called Metallica's guitar work aggressive noise that lacked melody or proper structure. One music critic reported hearing Blackmore say that Kirk depended too much on wah pedals and effects instead of pure guitar technique. Things reportedly got heated when guitar magazines started comparing thrash metal to classic rock guitar styles. According to witnesses, Blackmore made critical comments about Kirk's lack of classical music training. Some people say he constantly mocked Kirk for prioritizing speed over melody. Metal fans definitely noticed this disrespect. What drove Blackmore crazy, according to sources, was his belief that Kirk represented a decline in the quality of guitar playing in heavy music. He apparently told friends that thrash metal guitarists couldn't play cleanly if their lives depended on it. People who worked in the industry at the time remember Blackmore completely refusing to acknowledge Metallica's influence on guitar music. Steve Vai, known for his incredibly technical guitar playing, was another target of Blackmore's alleged criticism. According to sources, Blackmore thought Steve's playing was emotionless and was just about showing off technical skills without any real feeling behind the music. He apparently couldn't stand Steve's extremely technical approach to playing guitar. The tension supposedly started when Steve Vai emerged as a guitar virtuoso in the 1980s. People familiar with the situation say Blackmore felt Steve represented everything pretentious about modern guitar playing. He allegedly called Steve's music mathematical showing off for guitar nerds. One anonymous source claimed Blackmore said Steve's compositions were impressive displays of skill that nobody actually wanted to listen to more than once. Things reportedly became awkward at guitar industry events. According to witnesses, Blackmore completely avoided Steve at trade shows and conventions. Some insiders claim he made dismissive comments about Steve's custom guitars and his elaborate stage setups. Everyone who attended these events noticed the coldness between them. The really harsh part, according to sources, was that Blackmore believed Steve Vai sacrificed real musicality for technical perfection. He apparently told music journalists that Steve's playing lacked human touch and emotional depth. People who worked in the industry recall Blackmore saying Steve could play 1,000,000 notes but couldn't write one memorable melody. Joe Satriani, the famous instrumental rock guitarist, also allegedly faced Blackmore's criticism. According to sources, Blackmore thought Joe's music was just boring technical demonstrations, pretending to be actual songs. He apparently deeply resented Joe's success with instrumental guitar albums. The feud supposedly began when Joe's album, Surfing with the Alien, became a huge hit. People familiar with the situation say Blackmore couldn't believe people were buying instrumental albums that he viewed as just guitar exercises. He allegedly told friends that Joe's music was background noise for guitar students who were practicing scales. One music producer claimed to have heard Blackmore say that Joe's sense of melody was ordinary and formulaic at best. Things reportedly got tense at guitar clinics and educational events. According to witnesses, Blackmore made sarcastic remarks about Joe's teaching methods and technique books. Some people say he dismissed Joe's theoretical knowledge as useless academic information for players who couldn't naturally feel music. This rivalry apparently split the guitar education community. Yngwie Malmsteen, the neoclassical shred guitarist, was someone Blackmore allegedly had very personal issues with. According to sources, Blackmore thought Yngwie was a shameless copycat who stole his idea of combining classical music with rock guitar and made it obnoxious. This rivalry was reportedly deeply personal and very bitter. The tension supposedly exploded when Yngwie burst onto the music scene playing classical-inspired metal. People close to the situation say Blackmore felt that Yngwie had stolen his entire concept and just made it faster and louder. He allegedly told music journalists that Yngwie was playing botch at metal speeds and pretending it was original. One anonymous source claimed Blackmore said Yngwie had no restraint, no taste, and just endlessly showed off. Things reportedly became extremely hostile when guitar magazines featured both guitarists. According to witnesses, Blackmore became furious when journalists compared him favorably to Yngwie. Some insiders claim he walked out of interviews if Yngwie's name was even mentioned. The hatred was supposedly intense and completely mutual between these two classical guitar-influenced players. Perhaps surprisingly, Eric Clapton was also allegedly on Blackmore's list of guitarists he couldn't stand. Clapton, who was famously called God by his fans, apparently annoyed Blackmore with his blues-focused approach and massive reputation. According to sources, Blackmore thought Eric was overrated and had been living off his past achievements for decades. The rivalry supposedly goes back to the 1960s British blues boom. People familiar with the situation say Blackmore resented Eric getting crowned as a guitar god while he received less recognition. He allegedly called Eric's playing safe and predictable blues recycling. One music critic reported hearing Blackmore say that Eric never evolved beyond basic blues scales and pentatonic patterns. Things reportedly got nasty when both guitarists were constantly compared in guitar magazines. According to witnesses, Blackmore made cutting remarks about Eric's lack of innovation after his time with Cream. Some people say he dismissed Eric's entire solo career as boring blues rock for middle-aged listeners. This disrespect shocked blues rock fans everywhere. Jeff Beck, widely considered one of the most innovative guitarists ever, was another musician Blackmore allegedly had problems with. According to sources, Blackmore was jealous of Jeff's experimental approach and the critical respect he received. He apparently thought Jeff was being weird just for the sake of being weird, without actually serving the music. The feud supposedly started when Jeff Beck began his instrumental fusion experiments. People familiar with the situation say Blackmore couldn't understand why critics praised Jeff's unconventional playing so highly. He allegedly told friends that Jeff's music was unlistenable noise disguised as innovation. One anonymous source claimed Blackmore said Jeff had abandoned rock guitar for aimless jazz fusion wandering. Things reportedly became explosive at guitar award ceremonies. According to witnesses, Blackmore appeared bitter whenever Jeff won Lifetime Achievement honors. Some insiders claim he made dismissive gestures during Jeff's acceptance speeches. The jealousy was apparently visible to everyone watching these events. The harsh reality, according to sources, was that Blackmore believed Jeff Beck was overrated by critics who confused weirdness with genius. He apparently felt Jeff's experimental phase completely alienated real rock fans. People who worked in the industry recall Blackmore saying that Jeff could have been great, but wasted his talent on self-indulgent nonsense that nobody wanted to hear. Jimmy Page, the legendary Led Zeppelin guitarist, was another major target of Blackmore's alleged criticism. According to sources, Blackmore thought Jimmy was sloppy, overrated, and taking credit away from better players. This rivalry supposedly defined British rock guitar conflicts. The tension allegedly began when Led Zeppelin became the biggest band on earth. People familiar with the situation say Blackmore was furious that Jimmy was being called one of the greatest guitarists ever. He supposedly told music journalists that Jimmy's playing was technically messy and full of mistakes. One music producer claimed to have heard Blackmore say that Jimmy's guitar solos were half-finished improvisations that only worked because of studio production magic. Things reportedly became legendary at industry gatherings. According to witnesses, Blackmore refused to acknowledge Jimmy's presence at parties and events. Some people say he made harsh comments about Led Zeppelin's blues appropriation and lack of originality. This rivalry became the stuff of rock and roll folklore. Finally, at the top of the list is Jimi Hendrix himself, according to sources. This was Blackmore's deepest and most painful jealousy in guitar history. He apparently couldn't accept that Jimmy was universally considered the greatest guitarist who ever lived. The rivalry supposedly began when Jimmy exploded onto the London music scene in the late 1960s. People familiar with the situation say Blackmore attended Jimmy's early shows and felt completely overshadowed by his revolutionary playing style. He allegedly told friends that Jimmy was all feedback and theatrics without real musical knowledge. One anonymous source claimed Blackmore said Jimmy's success proved that showmanship beats actual skill every single time. Things reportedly became obsessive over the years. According to witnesses, Blackmore constantly brought up Jimmy in interviews, always criticizing his technique. Some insiders claim he said Jimmy couldn't read music and relied on lucky accidents instead of deliberate composition. This bitterness apparently lasted throughout Blackmore's entire career. These are the 10 guitarists that Ritchie Blackmore allegedly had the most problems with throughout his career. According to various sources and reports from people in the music industry, these rivalries were intense and became legendary stories in the guitar world. Whether all of these claims are entirely accurate is difficult to verify, as they come from anonymous sources and second-hand reports. However, they paint a picture of a guitarist who had very strong opinions about his peers and wasn't afraid to express them, even when those opinions were harsh or controversial.